Dwitim kjav jo maxen, jos nevni nidna boro. Mai mila kwe kanta förlondorer, janam sarit hiriorko. Panat magnos maximota komare, jan fleden tjöjan du euritry. An gadelen gente gofan, a heda viela ni riamo ahui. Riamo ahui. Egwefa pawaba pofet, igwefa pawaba pofet, igwefa pawaba pofet, riamo ahui. Weather in ginto dairen, rurit storm i ormor. Holte melia ruerbren, jag grader i dagen ankor. Till vid avrio guandialon, lever i tagialor. En dvidjar dag för en kompas, rinjen beradam guariror, riamo ahuid, riamo ahuid. Egwefa pawaba pofet, igwefa pawaba pofet, igwefa pawaba pofet, riamo ahuid. Kofani faxien willending, ideeling willar in jundan, I blodin gerobron I gwelidil, mi fjegin jam tandja di fan, agwetha pop dixion diaifid, agwetha ren fjagjakjör, Byndiam hidirodianam sör, abjedar yidith kemar voriamo ahuid, riamo ahuid. Agwetha pawaba popeth, igwefa pawaba popeth, igwefa pawaba popeth, riamo ahuid. I'll just be driving down the road and belting that one out sometimes. That's a very favorite song of mine. All right, so today's episode I've decided to split into two parts. So I'll have my daily upload for tomorrow set, and I can focus on my other two projects that I'm cranking out, Tier List and Zionist Special Part 2. So let's get into it. Have you tried this new tech? It's called Thinking. Thinking is like AI on steroids. You gotta try it. You may have noticed by now, but I got a little bit of pepper on me. I'm not your typical vanilla goyslop, bisexual lighting in a stark white room with figurines or a bookshelf behind me sort of guy. I'm a little bit spicy. I'm glad programmers have a new tool to make coding easier, but you're not going to map the entire universe in your LLMs, and people aren't falling for it as an illusion at the rate of which it needs to be sustained for that sort of function. You're not going to flatten the world to make it easier to calculate it either. I see that's what's going on. Life will continue to grow outside of the parameters of your lambda calculus, and you're only salting the ground beneath your own feet, Buster. Like, see how this works? As trees are constantly growing. Why tally sticks were used by the Knights Templar in the first international banking system is because it's impossible to counterfeit the wood grain on a specific piece of wood, because it's constantly growing and it's always unique. And in that way, trees are completely confusing for AI. And so, you can see a lot of the AI being rolled out in the Middle East, but they actually have to obliterate all the trees in order to make it viable in the same rate in a wooded area. For that matter, let's get into one honest criticism I can levy against Nick Rochefort, is that at times he advocates for absolutely insane behavior during his house flipping, construction stuff. The man sees no value in nurturing trees. He advocates for working at night, which is like, you gotta be, if you're working around other people, you shouldn't be doing that. That's insane. And he's way too attached to the material, which at the end of the day, he's projecting salesmanships. He's projecting an aura of salesmanship to get people excited about the things that he's selling. Duh. That's, it's not for me to say what he feels about material stuff. behind closed doors. But I will say his tendency to advocate for just clear cutting most of the property is insane. But I know where it comes from. At the end of the day, this also must be benched in the context of his generation. And I think about this a lot. And I think the locus of Gen X's anger comes from being benched between two enormously passive generations. One that's past their physical prime, but in many such cases contains vast stores of knowledge and wisdom, and the millennials, who are simultaneously more physically as well as psychologically more passive. In most cases, the young to middle-aged people who grew up with internet access contain tremendous amounts of aptitude, puzzle-solving ability, high IQ, but at the cost of physical investment and neural connection to the physical world via substitution by simulation. So they're not as plugged into the real world. They're not as, their dopamine centers aren't wired around doing physical stuff as much as they are around doing stuff online, you see, or in video games and stuff like that. And so the Xers, Generation X, writhe in anxiety of their own of inaction, and they covet those young and old who show themselves to be physically active and rebellious more even than their own generation, who is that at a baseline, you see. And they value work for the sake of work, even if it's more proud than efficient. There's really no other reason why, they would feel good in participating as golems and destroying the nature. You remember one old episode, Ants versus Golems? It really is Ants versus Golems. And when I see Italians without Christianity, I know what golems are. Because, Jewish people in many cases are physically weak but mentally strong, and they do their best. They succeed the most when they're manipulating other people, especially, other races. And the Italians, they crave a power structure. And with the dissolution of the Vatican, the power structure for Italians has turned into the international market. That was the ultimate goal of a lot of these CIA operations. Even though their penultimate goal was the destruction of communism, their ultimate goal was to set up a new world order that would take the place of communism afterwards, centered around the OPEC dollar, which has been an abject disaster. We can clean up a lot of this carbon pretty easily. Yes, it may be turning our planet, our environment, into a more Triassic sort of state, before the big ice age in which that happened after the meteor that humanity kind of came up out of later on, that helped develop us and push us in our technologies. And led to the great floods as the ice started to melt in multiple great floods, especially when there was a huge lake in the northern ice cap that melted, the ice wall melted and released this gigantic flood, and that was the great biblical flood recorded in biblical history. But that's all from the slowly melting north ice cap that's been melting this entire time. And so humanity isn't as involved in the melting of the ice cap as we are in burning our own oxygen up and increasing the amount of carbon in the atmosphere, which it has its benefits. But at the same time, the methane is 10 times worse at causing a greenhouse effect that is baking our planet and making the more delicate life harder to survive, and so creating a domino effect that unravels ecosystems. That's the ultimate issue. And I'm so on board with people who believe in things like weather modification, because it's just okay, you can talk to these people. You're just okay, you believe that it's possible for human beings to create machines that can modify the weather. Great, we're on the same page, because I also believe that. It's just in 2 billion cars. And that's mostly from the burning of oxygen, not the creation of carbon dioxide, but the burning of oxygen in internal combustion engines. That's a big issue. And the more powerful we get our trucks for literally novelty and aesthetic purposes, which you see a lot of these people have talked about a lot, a giant truck in a suburb, you're not using that. But people idle it for long periods of time to feel like they have, something that they have power, that they have control over. That's part of, a lot of Italians are doing that because they lack a power structure to attach themselves to. I don't feel bad for them, but it is what it is. You try to fix the whole macro system with good investments, and then eventually you hope that people make the right choices to start building stuff up again, like genuinely building stuff up again. It seems like a lot of people have it in their mind that they're just going to extract. They're going to get theirs, and then oh well, tough cookie for you. Like literally, the sort of person who would go out and pick every single morel mushroom in an area and leave nobody else with none. Like, that's the sort of behavior that people did not used to exhibit, because people used to be more willing to at least share opportunities with people. And that's a big problem that we're facing, is we don't have good religious moral structure. People don't spend enough energy at church, and people don't spend enough time thinking and questioning what's on the TV and what the given line is. So they end up just falling into these very selfish short-term behaviors that end up just depleting their long-term opportunities for themselves and their families, but also depleting their neighborhood and their state opportunities as well. That's the thing that we're fighting against. There's really no other reason for destroying the beauty of nature if it's not immediately threatening you. The wasteful ass lumberjack chicanery, chopping up 90% or more of trees on an entire lot. It's part and parcel of having a unfocused mind and being ugly on the inside. That's a lot of Gen X, I hate to say it, based on what they've been exposed to and the people that they've been forced to be put around. It makes it easier for bad people to do stupid things quicker if there are no trees. It just does across the board. And that's kind of the point. It's kind of the entire point. Gradually, I began to hate them. Those damn dwarves! Total dwemer death today, tomorrow, and forever. Nothing says we need tariffs more than the existence of rage rooms. We are insane babies and we need to stop. Unfortunately, it seems like Trump is backpedaling on a lot of the tariffs because he's got so many people screaming in his ears all the time. And I wish he would just do it. Go with your gut. Do it. Your gut is telling you the truth. We need to set up a tariff system to bite back on international trade, which would substitute the amount of taxes that the United States population has to pay. That's what we need. If you're going to make $1 trillion budget, you better find a way to pay for it that doesn't come off of the backs of working people. Me Too started off good, but it just turned into a manifestation of pure toxic femininity. However, not exclusively, I have literally seen far-right males employ the exact same smear campaign tactics on innocent men for their own personal reasons. When they can't, compete with their argument, they'll reach into that particular box. And that's the manifestation of the they go low, we go lower soul trap that the media has people in. And that's exactly the sort of Canaanite behavior of Cain, where, you kill one, we kill 70, and that just creates a war, salts the earth, and then the entire region is damned for thousands of years. With a little bit of people suffering to stand against it, and eventually being crushed by the macro system, which is why we got to focus on the macro system. Doing things one at a time. But you also have to always ask yourself, what's the long-term ramifications of this? Here's a good method for navigating Latin America. At least this works in predominantly Catholic areas. The closer the hands are on the crucifix, the more danger you currently are in. Do not forget this. But the Spanish language is really cool. There are like 500 dialects, and it's deeply steeped in history. And when you study it, just like when you study Latin, you get a lot of history out of it. And it's not exclusively Latin. There's a lot of Latin in it, but it also has some like really grounded, exclusively Iberian, and then a little bit of Carthaginian, which Latin does too, and a little touch of Greek, a little touch of Middle Eastern, a little teeny touch of French. It's very fascinating how languages work, and they got a lot of loan words, and they interact with each other and grow. I think when Jeffrey Epstein died, they put his soul into the phylactery, and they had a high-level Talmudic wizard transfer his soul into Rabbi Shmuley. Rabbi Shmuley contains multitudes of sex offenders. The only people upset with the Christ is King line are the people whose ancestors ceded responsibility to Pontius Pilate going back to that whole Italian thing, who, going against their protestation, wrote Jesus Nazarenius Rex Iudiorum, Jesus Christ, the Nazarene, King of the Jews. It is what it is. He has written what he has written. You guys ceded authority to him. You gotta live by it. It's no coincidence that when the Soviet Union died in the 90s, Israel became super active. Ooh, hold on. Jewish rabbit, Christian, as in rabbi, Christian cardinal, the bird, Muslim cat, it's a gimme, Hindu cow. Ooh, atheist tapeworm. Awesome. There we go. New fantasy race is unlocked. All right, y'all. I'm going to split the second half of this episode into another one and think about what song to sing. And that'll give me a lot of time to work on my other projects. All right. Take care. See you on the next one. See you soon. Cheers.